You know, it's 2021. Wow. We went through all kind of things in 2020. But this is season 2 of another episode of the Andre The Beast Show. And I decided to do something a little bit different for our opening show. Naturally, I brought back with me the two that helped me start it out, which is Paul Jefferson and David Benz. And yes, they are my lawyers. And when you're going to have certain topics, you better make sure that you got it covered. So, with that said, today we're going to dabble into a little bit of politics, but the good side of politics. We're going to talk about the office of Lieutenant Governor. You know what? And I asked this in the gym day, what exactly is the Lieutenant Governor?
Why don't we ask the Lieutenant Governor to answer?
You know what? We got on the show with us today Lieutenant Governor LG Suzanne Crouch. Susan, welcome to the show.
It's good to be with you. I'm looking forward to it. I'm curious.
So, Susan, let's take it from that point. Exactly what is an LG?
Well, I guess probably the easiest way to explain the lieutenant is like the vice president. So I would serve as governor if for some reason the governor would be incapacitated. But in Indiana, the lieutenant governor is so much more than that. And in fact, the lieutenant governor in Indiana probably has more duties and responsibilities than any other lieutenant governor in the country.
Okay.
Constitutionally, I'm president of the Senate. So when the Senate is in session, I'm at the front of the Senate at the podium running the proceedings.
Right.
I just want to share with you that as a former state representative for 8 years, it's so gratifying to finally be in charge of the senators. So
I bet.
I remember everyone that voted against my bills also. I wield a pretty mean gavel. But statutorily, I oversee agencies in Indiana. So I am Secretary of Agriculture and Rural Development. I oversee our Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, and then the Indiana Destination Development Corporation. But in addition to that, I have many other initiatives and many other duties, ranging from last year chairing the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission, the Census Commission, the Civic Education Task Force, which was sponsored by the Indiana Bar Association.
Right.
And I think what is near and dear to my heart is I chair the Intellectual and Developmental Disability Task Force.
Okay.
And we have about 100,000 Hoosiers in Indiana that have an intellectual or developmental disability. And those are Hoosiers with autism, cerebral palsy, and Down syndrome. Right. And so through that task force, we work to ensure that they have safe, accessible, affordable environments to live, work, play, study, and stay. And I always say that our friends with disabilities are merely just friends with different abilities. Okay. And they have the same dreams and hopes and desires as each and every one of us. They want to have a job and have friends and love and be loved and be successful in life. And through that task force, we work to ensure that they can fulfill the dreams they dream and build the lives they want to build.
So, Susan, tell me about you growing up as a young lady in Indiana. Tell me about your journey, because definitely to get where you are at right now, were there any obstacles that were in your way, and if so, how did you overcome those before transitioning and even becoming the LG to today?
You know, interesting question. on my childhood, I was the second of 5 children. I was the oldest of 4 girls. And my father and mother raised us to all be equal. So that meant we as girls did yard work and we did hard labor around the house and outside. And my brother also did housework and dishes and, you know, whatever it was that we did. So we all kind of were treated as equal growing up. So I think that kind of stayed with me throughout life. I've always considered myself equal to everyone and everyone equal to me. But my values that were instilled by my parents, along with my faith that reinforced those values, were, I think, what led me to public service, because I was raised to believe in God, to believe it takes hard work to get ahead,
Right.
To believe in equality and opportunity. Equality and opportunity. And I also raised to have a strong sense of personal responsibility, but to also readily accept I have a responsibility to help other people. And so it was that kind of drive and desire to help others, to lift them up and to make life better for them, that I think ultimately led me to public service and to political life. But I didn't get there right away. I graduated from Purdue University and worked in the private sector as a realtor, a stockbroker, a small business owner, and really didn't grow up as a Republican or a Democrat.
Right.
My parents always voted, but I don't recall political discussions growing up.
Were there?
So I grew up as an independent, and it wasn't until, I don't know, had been married maybe 4 or 5 years, and I said to my husband one day, I really like to get involved in politics. And that desire to get involved was inspired by Ronald Reagan, our 40th president, who was such a clear voice in defining the essence of America.
Okay.
And Ronald Reagan was so incredibly focused on helping others, but helping ourselves. And so I'm going to stop there because as you can see, I can talk.
Well, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. Was he one of the platforms that opened your mind up and reinforced what you wanted to do? What was it so special about Ronald Reagan? Was there a speech that he gave to you that all of a sudden this light came on in your head and go, this is exactly what I want to do?
Yeah, you know, Ronald Reagan, he was such a beacon for young conservatives, idealistic conservatives. And he spoke unapologetically about individual responsibility without helping hand. And he put a strong military abroad and fought for American values without making you enemies. But he always reminded us that we must never rest in the fight to protect life and liberty. And I remember the speech when Ronald Reagan said, freedom is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. And we didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for and protected and handed on for them to do the same. And I looking back, that is what really kind of struck a chord with me. You know, the liberties that we enjoy are fought for and protected and handed on for each generation to do the same. And so I remember that is what kind of was my impetus in getting involved in politics, and I ended up becoming involved in the Republican Party as a result.
Based on what you see right now, what you just said, what former President Reagan said about the generations being one motion away from extinction, knowing that that's something that you remember clearly to this day, what have you instilled in your political race as a phrase to people to keep that from happening, the extension from happening?
Well, I talk about, you know, that very quote in many of my speeches. And, you know, Ronald Reagan was a great president and one who inspired me. Abraham Lincoln also was a great president and one who inspired me. Of course, he called Indiana home, you know, for the formative years in his life, and lived in Spencer County, which is down in my neck of the woods, coming from Vanderburgh County. And so when we gave our swearing in remarks just weeks ago, I quoted Ronald Reagan and mentioned that in his final address in his office as president, he reminded everyone of the accomplishments of the 1980s. Mm-hmm. And he said, we did it. We weren't just marking time, we made a difference.
Right.
And that is truly, at the end of the day, we are here for such a short period of time that if we can't make a difference, if we can't lift people up and improve their lives, then why are we here?
Right, right.
So when you became lieutenant governor, I'm sure you didn't foresee some of the challenges that have come, particularly in the way of, global pandemics and, wearing masks, and it's just a completely unprecedented world for us anyway. So, and I know a lot of your responsibilities include economic development, particularly in rural areas, which I'm sure are challenged particularly because the governmental infrastructure isn't the same there as it would be in some of our bigger cities in Indiana. And I guess my question is, how can Hoosiers kind of assist you in bringing to you ideas and other things to be able to accomplish the economic incentives development and basically safety net issues that need to happen in those communities, given all that's going on with COVID-19 and other things?
Well, absolutely. And I travel quite a bit. And it is a way I keep in touch with our constituents and people throughout the state. I come from Evansville, and you all may or may not know, I have an apartment. I live in Indianapolis during the week, but I travel to Evansville every weekend. And that's where I stay. That's where my husband is, and it's where my home is. And, I continue to do that. But I think that in local politics, or starting local politics in Vanderburgh County, and always having that physical disconnect from our capital city, really impressed upon me how important it is to have that connection, and that our local communities around the state, not here in central Indiana, but outside of central Indiana, understand that this is a partnership and we're in it together. And when they feel that that is existing, then we're able to really accomplish great things. So I spend a lot of time when we're not in session on the road, traveling throughout Indiana to our urban and our rural communities, connecting with them, lifting them up and celebrating their successes, but letting them know that we are here and we are partners, and I'm accessible. I call mayors periodically, I call county commissioners, I try to stay in touch those makers and those influencers who really are making a difference in their communities. And certainly a lot of people have my cell phone, so I'm not hard to get a hold of it, trust me.
Dave, you had a question?
I started to. I want to focus on some of the various hats that you've worn, because I actually had a question about all those various hats that you wear, and is there one that you like better than another? Sort of how do you motivate yourself to excel at all of them? Because clearly looking at your track record, you have an amazing success record. But if we were to go and focus in on some of the specifics of some of those hats that you do wear, Paul started asking by saying, what is it that Hoosiers can do to help you with certain things like rural development and whatnot? If we focused in on the Indiana Destination Development Corporation, what do you see that looking like? This is such a weird time. Tourism has got to be has most certainly has to be down. I don't know statistics, but I have to feel like it's down given the state that we're all in. We're about to get a big infusion with the NCAA. I'd like to hear what participation you played in that role, or in that development. But more importantly, what does the rest of the state look like? What things are being done for the rest of the state outside of Indianapolis and its surrounding communities?
Well, let me start with the Indiana Destination Development Corporation. In July of 2020, what used to be our tourism state agency was transitioned into the Indiana Destination Development Corporation, which is a quasi-government agency similar to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. And of course, right at that time, we were in the throes of our pandemic. And the industry that was most immediate and hardest hit was our tourism, our travel and leisure related industry. And they still are suffering as a result of the pandemic because of the restrictions that are placed upon them, but also because of the the social distancing, the fact that people are encouraged not to get out and to travel. So that has really been a challenge for us. It is why we were able to secure $4 million of CARES Act money to be able to help our cultural events, our festivals and our fairs, those kind of quality of life happenings that didn't take place over the summer and fall because of COVID. And we were able to infuse cash into 41 of those organizations, or actually more than that, to be able to help them get through and bridge this very difficult time, that they continue to be a part of our quality of life that we have here in Indiana. NCAA tournament, absolutely an incredible opportunity for Indiana. The amount of visitors will be restricted. We all understand that. Wish it wasn't so, but it is. And here is the real benefit of not just showcasing Indiana and central Indiana and Indianapolis, but also Evansville and I believe it's Fort Wayne, because they'll be playing their divisions of basketball. This is an opportunity to really showcase Indiana, to really be able to show those influential people that are coming in from all over the country what Indiana's about and what we have to offer. Those of you who remember the Super Bowl back, when was that? In 08? Was that in 08?
I believe so.
Yeah.
09? There, 07, maybe 06? I can't remember.
The Super Bowl was in Indianapolis in 2012.
2012.
Was it 2012? My goodness. Okay. Do you remember the comments people made about how they couldn't believe Indianapolis, what an incredible city it was to be able to showcase the Super Bowl, how walkable it was, what all we had to offer. We had that same opportunity again to do the very same thing, not just showcase Indianapolis, but showcase our other communities around the state where that activity is also going to be taking place. So we are really pumped and psyched, and we are working with our partners at Visit Indy to be able to ensure, and in Evansville and Fort Wayne, to be able to ensure that we are going to put our best foot forward, showing that Hoosier hospitality that we're so well known for.
Let me ask you a question. We dealt with this pandemic, and a lot of people suffered drastically, both financial, emotional. We had a lot of increases in depression, and my question to you is, from a family standpoint, outside of the political arena, what were some of the things that you felt that affected not only you, but affected the state, the world, and by being in a political office, what did the hurt that came from that? How did you manage to implement your sufferings back into the political arena to address those things? Because clearly we've all felt the sting. So now you got to ask yourself, what changes need to take place with this so we don't have this happening to us again? Because let's get real, we had fear. Fear set in at its most high, and I respect the fact that you guys did a great job at neutralizing the situation, but the bottom line is it may resurface. And now that you was a part of this, what did you bring back to your office and say, look, this happened in my home, this happened to people that I know, how do we prevent it, and what's the next step? Have you guys come up with a solution for that?
Well, you bring a really incredibly important point, and that is the human suffering as a result of COVID-19. It's what keeps me up at night, and it's what keeps the governor up at night, is that human cost to families as a result of COVID-19. In particularly those Hoosiers that are facing mental health challenges, that are fighting addiction, are victims of violence, or those very vulnerable Hoosiers are the ones that are suffering the most. Because for those of us who do not have those challenges, this has been a very stressful time.
Correct.
Because it has been full of uncertainty and change. And we all like certainty in our lives. We all like stability. We all like knowing what is next and being able to plan for that. And that has been taken away.
Right.
So then you put on top of it individuals with challenges, and now you are really talking about a human cost, not just to families, but that economic cost to budgets at the state, the local, and the federal level for years to come. So what we are focused on, and what I told the governor I want to focus on personally over the next 4 years, is mental health
Right.
and addiction, and how we can continue to supplement what we're doing. Because here in Indiana, we do a good job in terms of our mental health services and delivery and addiction. We've done some incredibly innovative things. But how can we do more? You know, how can we really supplement what we're currently doing so that we can provide that safety net and give those services to Hoosiers that need it? 1 out of 5 Hoosiers suffers from addiction or from mental health. So there's probably not one of us here today that hasn't had a family member or knows someone that is struggling with mental health or addiction issues. And, you know, those are the ones we have to make a difference for, because they're the ones we need in the workforce. They're the ones that we want to have healthy, productive lives, and we want to be able to offer that equality and opportunity to them so that they can be successful. And it's going to be a challenge. I'm right now to learn more about mental health. I certainly have family members that have struggled with mental health and addiction issues. In fact, my brother, who's in recovery, relapsed during COVID. He's back in recovery now, but you know, he said he wasn't making excuses, but not having support groups that you can go to and not having that stability in one's life has put additional stress on people. So I'm on a personal journey working with Department of Mental Health to learn more about what we're doing currently in Indiana, and then work with faith-based leaders and with community leaders and professionals to try to determine how can we help what we're doing to be able to, you know, to be able to provide comfort and be able to provide, you know, that kind of support and those services that they need in this very unusual time to be happy, productive Hoosiers.
Can you talk a little bit about, you know, before COVID-19 happened, Indiana was kind of the exception in the Midwest in terms of building manufacturing jobs and doing some other things economically that kind of were the envy of other states. And I can only imagine that you and the governor are moving forward on a particular trajectory, and you have to do a pivot unlike anything anybody's ever seen, and just regroup. And frankly, you all should be proud of the fact that, you know, at various times Indiana's numbers have increased and you've brought them back down, and you know, we've not been hit, I think, as hard as maybe some other states have that have the same type of economic infrastructure. But I wonder just what it was like on the inside when you had to have those conversations and just completely jettison your plans and move forward to deal with this crisis. I mean, how did that function, and can you just say a little bit about what that was like?
Sure. Well, when COVID-19 hit, we all kind of pivoted in government. We all kind of pivoted, my agencies included, to be able to kind of refocus their delivery of services to help those who are in need as a result of COVID-19. So, for instance, the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, you know, has been able to grant $21 million in grants to small rural communities throughout Indiana to help them either with health and safety initiatives that they have, or giving grants or loans to small businesses to help them during this very trying time. Maybe establishing Wi-Fi hotspots in communities that don't have that broadband and internet, which we do want to talk about broadband before this
Okay.
is over. So we did learn how to pivot and to refocus our energies to be able to help Hoosiers in need, because that really was what we were dealing with COVID-19. We ended up knowing that our general fund revenues were impacted. We cut all of our state budget agencies 15% to be able to cut down on what we were spending as a result of those, diminished revenues. Here's the interesting thing. At the end of 2020, we had 31,000 job commitments, which is more than we had in 2019, and really a 5-year record. So in spite of COVID-19, Indiana created more job commitments than they had in the previous 5 years. And building permits statewide are up over 11% in 2020 over 2019. So to me, it speaks to the strong foundation, economic foundation we have here in Indiana as a result of fiscal conservative leadership over the past 16 years, where we balance budgets and we keep taxes low, and we have over a $2 billion surplus and a AAA credit bond rating by all 3 independent rating agencies. That is what has kept us strong enough to have the foundation to be able to keep growing our opportunities. And that in turn creates some other challenges. And those challenges are, as we're attracting people from other places and we're growing our population, how do we ensure that we have adequate workforce housing? How do we ensure we have adequate housing for Hoosiers? How do we ensure that, minorities and people that are disadvantaged have those opportunities to have a home and to have a place to live and put their head down at night so that they can continue to have lives, have ability? And those are the challenges that we face and continue to address with or without COVID. But certainly COVID has made it more challenging. But I also think we have risen to the occasion as a state. And what I hear from people, Hoosiers that are in other states and visiting other states and living in Florida, during the winter, is Indiana is doing it right in terms of how we're delivering our vaccinations, how we are, putting in the right kind of balance between keeping Hoosiers safe and keeping our economy open.
You said something about the broadband.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that real quick.
Well, we learned through COVID-19 that being connected is no longer a luxury. It is absolutely essential, because our students are e-learning, our workers are teleworking, and healthcare is being delivered telehealth. And so being connected is absolutely critical. That's why in 2018, Governor Holcomb and I dedicated and committed $100 million to expanding broadband through rural Indiana. To date, we've awarded $79 million of that, connecting over 22,000 businesses and households here in Indiana.
Right.
The federal government also knows how important and critical it is, and that is why in December of 2020, they announced and awarded $169 million here in Indiana to connect 153,000 Hoosiers over the next 6 years. Governor Holcomb has indicated and is working with the General Assembly to try to get an additional $100 million in state funding in this budget cycle to continue to connect Hoosiers. Because back in 2018, Purdue University released a study saying that there were, at that time, about 500,000 Hoosiers in internet darkness. And if they were all connected, it would result in an additional $1 billion to our state economy. That is why we made that commitment back in 2018. And it is more real and more viable today than it was back then. And it looks like I need to be spending more time on broadband here in my home. My connection isn't the best, so I'm gonna get on that as soon as this phone call, or as soon as this interview's over.
Lieutenant Governor, I'm gonna switch gears on you just a little bit and go back to something that you've already addressed, and in fact, you have somewhat answered this question. but I want to revisit it because it's a passion of mine. Because quite frankly, I've got a ton of questions for you, and we don't have that much time. I want to go back to the Indiana Intellectual and Development Disabilities Task Force that you chair.
Yes.
And I can save a lot of time. Are you familiar with something called Biddy and Bo's Coffee Shop? It's in North Carolina.
Do you know? I know a little bit about it. In fact, it's one of the owners who native originally. Is that?
Yes.
Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think Amy and Ben Wright. Amy Wright was CNN's Person of the Year a few years ago, and that sort of raised my awareness to it. It's something that I'm very committed to. But I had the opportunity to talk to her husband, who is a Indiana native, a Hoosier native, and he said something to me that was very, very profound. It was something that I had never thought about before. It's kind of obvious, so I was a little bit embarrassed that I hadn't thought about it. But he said, for the vast majority of us, we define ourselves by what we do. I'm a lawyer. Paul's a lawyer. Dre, you're a roustabout. I don't know what your official title is.
I'm a beast.
He's a beast. But that's how we define ourselves. Yes, I'm a husband. I'm a father. But most people know me as that really boring tax lawyer. There is as you know, there's a good chunk of our population that doesn't enjoy that same ability to define themselves by what they do. You talked, and certainly in looking at the website, there are services that Indiana makes available. But what kind of focus has there been on just beyond services and providing safe environments? What about providing opportunities? What sort of things have been done to provide opportunities for those people?
Yes, absolutely. 80% of Hoosiers with a disability, now I'm not just talking about an intellectual and developmental disability, but a disability. 80% of Hoosiers with disabilities are unemployed. And can we only imagine Indiana if 80% of Hoosiers with a disability were employed? So we are working, the task force actually has, back in the spring and early summer, started looking at how we provide those, starting with state government, because we are the ones that should be setting the example. And so and there's so many opportunities out there, and these individuals with particularly intellectual and developmental disability have so much to offer. When I was an auditor of state, I ended up speaking at a graduation ceremony for those seniors that had an intellectual and developmental disability that were interning in state agencies. And I was so impressed with their commitment and their desire to be productive members and participate in the workforce just like anyone else, that I hired a young man who actually is now with me still in Lieutenant Governor's office. And I'm not speaking ill of any of my other employees because they're all great. But this young man is incredibly responsible. He is always on time. He never calls in sick. He has the strongest work commitment, that anyone could have. And these are the individuals that we need to be providing opportunities to. We need to be getting into the workforce because, as you all know, we have about 100,000 jobs that are unfilled here in Indiana. Why not skill up? Why not train? Why not get those individuals in the workforce and to help narrow that gap that we have, but also give them that opportunity to be contributing members of society. So we are looking at that. We're working on it, starting with our own state government. But we have a lot of work to do. And thank you for your interest and commitment. And maybe we can talk offline on how you can be helpful.
I'd love that.
We're gonna wrap up with two more questions for you. And those two questions are what I usually ask on all my closings. We've seen 2020 and we've seen the incoming of 2021. So this is a two-part question for you before we wrap up. You got to leave a message from what we had last year going into this year, a message of positivity to the viewers. And then what's next for you going into 2022? 2021 before we wrap up?
Well, I think my message to people is, as I mentioned earlier, we're here for such a short period of time. I mean, we all are so wrapped up in our lives and who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, we are here for such a tiny bit of time that we have to not waste one single moment. We have to live every day to the fullest. And then we have to be focused on how can we make a difference in the lives of our friends and people around us, but just in the population in general. How can we lift people up and make a difference in their lives? Whatever it is that we decide to do, that is my message. Live each life to the fullest. And let's be like Ronald Reagan. At the end of the day, let's not have any regrets and say, we weren't just marking time, we made a difference. Right. And so what does 2021, what does it look like? I think it looks very optimistic. Our economy is strong here in Indiana. We have hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel because we're seeing our elderly parents and grandparents and friends getting the vaccination, and we know that numbers are trending down. And so that we know that there is that hope and there is that ability to have that new normal. The change that we've all experienced as a result of COVID-19, let's that change. And then let's integrate those into our life and use that to move forward and have better lives than we've had before. So I'm terribly optimistic and I'm terribly hopeful for the future, and know that in spite of all the adversity and challenges we may have, we will find the beast inside of ourselves to be able to make a difference.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's LG Lieutenant Governor Susan Crouch. Thank you for being on the show. Appreciate it. Guys, thanks for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to the Andre The Beast Show.